Alright, well, what I'm working on today is a Chevrolet truck, upper AR bushings. And this is a part number for an AC Delco. This is what they look like. This is a brand new one, okay? This is what they look like when they're all fried. You can see how off-center it is and how that end is all off-center. When you take the rubber out, the rubber is all impacted and falling apart. I did not have to torch these to get them out, but there are reasons for doing that. This is what the shell looked like coming out. Now, I do this all without a press. I do it just with the railroad tie and some driving bushings. That's kind of what these things look like. That's what it looks like installed, but it doesn't have alignment yet, so but I put those in there. Here's the other side, and you're just going to take this nut loose right here. This 21 millimeter socket there, get that off. You don't need to hold the other side. You don't need to hold that or do anything with it. You can mark it if you want, but it's going to be so far off it's not going to matter. This is the front of it, and this is on the driver's side. I'm going to get a 13 millimeter. I'm going to take this nut out so I can get in there with the socket, because this is in the way and you don't want to ding this. It'd be nice to have it a little looser, because when I take all this stuff off and hang this assembly out, it's going to put some strain on this brake line, so I need to be careful with that, and I'd like it to be loose, so I'm going to flag it out. So what I do is I take this outer tie rod end off, okay, and I take the nut off all the way. Now this tie rod has a locking nut on there. You can see the little dimple. It's got a little dimple in it right here. Alright, and that's a lock nut. You want to take it all the way off before you do anything, because it's gonna, if you get it loose before you take the nut off, this little thing will spin inside. It will spin, this will spin, and you will not be able to get it off. You'll have to get a jack and put it back in there. You'll have to put a jack under it, put it back in there, and jack it up, and then take the nut off. So it's easier just to do it right the first time. So when I take these off, I use a hammer, and I just hit it here on the end right here. You can see where it's got a flat spot where it's been hit before. Just hit it a couple of times with a 2 or 3 pound hammer, and it just pops right out. So where we're at now is, I think this is a 1-inch nut. I took the cotter pin out already, and I'm about to take that off, and I'm going to hit this one with a hammer, but not on this side because it's got too much junk in the way. That's why I like to take the tie rod end off. You just rotate it around like this. You can hit it right here 2 or 3 times. Now I have a jack under it to keep this lower A-arm from going wild. Alright, really not 100% necessary, but I like to use the jack to lift and lower this when I'm putting it back together. So I go ahead and put it under there. It's wise to keep track of these things. You're relying on the shock to hold things together. So that's where we're at. I'm going to pop this guy off here. I'm going to put a bungee cord or something to hold this whole assembly from going wild on me, because it's going to put strain on this brake line. And it does have a stainless steel braided brake line. I replaced this a couple years ago, but you have to be careful with these things. They're not made for pulling and holding up anything. But I'm going to have to take these 2 guys out right here. Now, these are 11 millimeter nuts. You have to put a socket up under there or something to hold it. Well, I'm going to try to show at least a little bit of this hammer business. But what you want to do is you want to hit it about like this. And I'm not able to hit it right with one hand holding that camera, so. Well, that's not enough. I'm going to have to put this down. But that's what I do to get it loose. Alright, so I hit it 3 times to practice. 4th time it popped out. You want to make sure this nut is pretty loose before you get it all the way out, because it's going to pop up. Let's see how this thing has a little gap in there. It's got a little bit of tension on it, and the weight of this is leaning off. So I'm going to get something to hold this thing up and take that nut out, and we'll get to see the rest of the deal here. So I got these loose. I'm just showing this wrench I've got up under here. It's 11 millimeter up under there. That's how you hold that. You will not be able to get a socket in there, and the best time to do it is now. Now keep track of these nuts and all these little pieces. On this particular model, it has this holding the brake line up. It doesn't make any practical sense to pry this open or do anything like that. But keep track of those pieces, because they'll fall down in here on the ground. You don't want it to fall into any of that stuff. You'll be digging around for a special sized nut for that position, and that's not fun, so we don't want to do that. Alright, so once you get this 13 millimeter out, and just move this out of the way a little bit, you can get in there with your 21 millimeter socket and take that guy loose. Alright, so I've got a bungee cord holding this thing clocked all the way like this. Now you just pop this thing out. I'm going to take those two bolts out up there, and they come out pretty easy. You just push it out, reach around. Just pull that little guy out, and that's it. Nothing special about it at all. Other side's the same way. If there's junk in the way, just slide that washer up. Sometimes there's things in the way, so if you move that washer out of the way, you can get it to slide out. See, yeah, I can take this nut out right here, and that will clear it. Because when you go back together, things are going to be quite a bit tighter, and you might not be able to get it to come out. So. There you go. And this thing just comes off like so. That's it. Now, these ball joints have been replaced, so they're pretty good shape. Can't say they're perfect, but they're removed ball joints. They're lifetime warranty, so they're quite a bit tighter when they're new. This has probably got about 3 years of use on it. These bushings, these are the driver's side bushings. They're in much better shape than the passenger side ones. The passenger side ones were just blown big time, but you can see how it's off-centered. And that messes up the alignment right there. Makes the tire wear on the inside. So we'll get this fixed up. Pretty easy deal here. Alright, so when you drive it in, it's got to go all the way up to that edge right there. I just put a little bit of heat creep on there. Doesn't take much. Some light oil. And I did not put these in the freezer, or I did not do anything special to them. That's it. Turn this thing around so that it matches a little better to what I'm doing. Show how that fit on there, how that fits in there like that. You have to hit it on the outside edge. You can't hit it in the middle. It has to be on the outside edge only. Okay, so let me describe a few things here before I get moving to the next thought here. When you drive these in, well, if I can get to it, one-handed operation here. When you drive these things in, you can only hit it on this outside edge of this thing here. You cannot hit it in the center. Now, if you press it in with a press, and I've seen people use a press on these type of items, and push down on this and smash it and press this together, in which that's fine. It does put a little damage on there, I think, but I'd much rather have it so that you just hit it on the outside edge. Now, the only way to do that is to have something that fits it, and that's what I have right here. This thing fits it, and it's really close, because when it's driven all the way in, you can see that the edge gets real close to that A-arm there. And if it gets any closer than that, it's going to prevent you from getting it driving it in all the way. So it's drove in. There's nothing special here. This is all just hand tools and a railroad tie. I got this from the scrap yard, and it's really nice. I mean, it's a factory cut on there. It's got a little dimple on this end, but the other end's perfect. It's a beautiful piece to use for things like this. So if you don't have that, I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to go find one, or find something that will hold this up high enough off the ground for you to work on it. It is possible to do it just laying on the ground, but it's going to be a whole lot more work, because you need something to back it up. You need something that goes under this edge. Piece of concrete, something solid, because once you start beating on that, the spring reaction of this A-arm, it's going to spring back and forth and react to you hitting it and not go in. Then you will bend it and have lots more problems. So we don't want to do that. But this is together. It's all in. Now, in the case of you putting the polyurethane bushings on here, what you would do is, for the old bushings, you would heat this rubber up and catch it on fire and melt all that rubber out and take the center out, because it's vulcanized together, so there's no way really to get it out unless it's falling apart. Melt all that rubber out and leave that shell in there, because you need to retain the shell for the polyurethane bushings. Alright, well, from here, after you get those bushings all put in there. It's a pretty simple deal. You just get the thing and stick it back in there. And sometimes you have to hit it a little bit. But the one thing I was going to make a note about is when you tighten them up, you have to clock it. That's where things get tricky. And you tighten it up and you clock it, and it's in a, I'd say a 90-degree position here like this. Well, it's going to be spring loaded. And so when you try to put the ball joint, when you try to put it back in there, it's going to have a lot of spring pressure on it. So I'm going to use the jack to push it up on one side. I've got a jack stand over there, holding it up over there, and a lift, and my lift is holding it up in the front. I've got a gray air jack. Anyway, so get it in there, get the bolts, and when you tighten it up, you need to clock it. Don't tighten it up all the way down like this, because what's going to happen is when you put it on the ground, the suspension's going to go up, and it's going to wrap them dang bushings all up like this all the time. They're going to fail a lot faster. So, just a word of warning. I use this hole right here in the top, and this pry bar right here. It's a truck pry bar for tightening down binding straps on a big truck, 18-wheeler one. But I use it for everything. But I'll stick that in that hole and tweak that thing down so that I can get it put together. When you put it on the ground, it will relax that bushing and be in a neutral state and do what it's supposed to do and not be under strain and cause it to tear. So let me get this thing put together here and we'll